Chapter 7. The Elopement. It was probably on the stroke of 10, and Dick had been half asleep for some time against the bank, when Esther came up the road carrying a bundle. Some kind of instinct, or perhaps the distant light footfalls, recalled him, while she was still a good way off, to the possession of his faculties, and he half raised himself and blinked upon the world. It took him some time to recollect his thoughts. He had awakened with a certain blank and childish sense of pleasure, like a man who had received a legacy overnight, but this feeling gradually died away, and was then suddenly and stunningly succeeded by a conviction of the truth. The whole story of the past night sprang into his mind with every detail, as by an exercise of the direct and speedy sense of sight, and he arose from the ditch, and with rueful courage, went to meet his love. She came up to him, walking steady and fast, her face still pale, but to all appearance perfectly composed, and she showed neither surprise, relief, nor pleasure at finding her lover on the spot, nor did she offer him her hand. "Here I am," said he. "Yes," she replied, and then without a pause or any change of voice, "I want you to take me away," she added. "Away?" he repeated. "How? Where?" "Today," she said. "I do not care where it is, but I want you to take me away." "For how long?" "I do not understand," gasped Dick. "I shall never come back here any more," was all she answered. Wild words uttered, as these were, with perfect quiet of manner and voice, exercise a double influence on the hearer's mind. Dick was confounded. He recovered from astonishment only to fall into doubt and alarm. He looked upon her frozen attitude, so discouraging for a lover to behold, and recoiled from the thoughts which it suggested. "To me?" he asked. "Are you coming to me, Esther?" "I want you to take me away," she repeated with weary impatience. Take me away from here." The situation was not sufficiently defined. Dick asked himself with concern if she were altogether in her right wits. To take her away, to marry her, to work off his hands for her support. Dick was content to do all this, yet it required some show of love upon her part. He was not one of those tired and small-hearted males who would marry their love at the point of the bayonet, rather than not marry her at all. He desired the woman should come to his arms with an attractive willingness, if not with ardor. By Esther's bearing was more that of despair than that of love. It chilled him and taught him wisdom. "Dearest," he urged, "tell me what you wish, and you shall have it. Tell me your thoughts, and then I can advise you. But to go from here without a plan, without forethought, in the heat of a moment, is madder than madness, and can help nothing. I am not speaking like a man, but I speak the truth, and I tell you again, the thing's absurd, and wrong, and hurtful." She looked at him with a lowering, languid look of wrath. "So you will not take me?" she said. "Well, I will go alone." And she began to step forward on her way. But he threw himself before her. "Esther, Esther!" he cried. "Let me go, don't touch me. What right have you to interfere?" "Who are you to touch me?" she flashed out, shrill with anger. Then, being made bold by her violence, he took her firmly, almost roughly, by the arm and held her while he spoke. "You know well who I am, and what I am, and that I love you. You say I will not help you, but your heart knows the contrary. It is you who will not help me, for you will not tell me what you want. You see, or you could see, if you took the pains to look, how I have waited here all night to be ready at your service. I only asked information, I only urge you to consider, and I still urge and beg you to think better of your fancies. But if your mind is made up, so be it. I will beg no longer. I give you my orders, and I will not allow you to go hence alone." As she looked at him for a while with cold, unkind scrutiny, like one who descries the temper of a tool. "Well, take me away, then," she said with a sigh. "Good," said Dick. "Come with me to the stables, there we shall get the pony trap and drive to the junction. Tonight you shall be in London. I am yours so wholly that no words can make me more so, and besides, you know it, and the words are needless. May God help me to be good to you. Esther, may God help me, for I see that you will not." So, without more speech, they set out together, and were already got some distance from the spot, ere he observed that she was still carrying the handbag. She gave it up to him, passively, but when he offered her his arm, merely shook her head and pursed up her lips. The sun shone clearly and pleasantly, the wind was fresh and brisk upon their faces, and smelt racily of woods and meadows. As they went down into the valley of the Thyme, the babble of the stream rose into the air like a perennial laughter. On the faraway hills, sun burst and shadow raced along the slopes and leaped from peak to peak. Earth, air, and water, each seemed in better health, and had more of the shrewd salt of life in them than upon ordinary mornings, and from east to west, from the lowest glen to the height of heaven, from every look and touch and scent, a human creature could gather the most encouraging intelligence as to the durability and spirit of the universe. Now through all this walked Esther, picking her small steps like a bird, but silent and with a cloud under her thick eyebrows. She seemed insensible not only of nature, but of the presence of her companion. She was altogether engrossed in herself, and looked neither to right nor to left, but straight before her on the road. So when they came to the bridge, however, she halted, leaned on the parapet, and stared for a moment at the clear, brown pool and swift transient snowdrift of the rapids. "I am going to drink," she said, and descended the winding footpath to the margin. There she drank greedily in her hands and washed her temples with water. The coolness seemed to break, for an instant, the spell that lay upon her, for instead of hastening forward again in her dull, indefatigable tramp, she stood still where she was for near a minute, looking straight before her. And Dick, from above on the bridge where he stood to watch her, saw a strange, equivocal smile dawn slowly on her face and pass away again at once, and suddenly, leaving her as grave as ever, and the sense of distance, which it is so cruel for a lover to endure, pressed with every moment more heavily on her companion. Her thoughts were all secret. Her heart was locked and bolted, and he stood without, vainly wooing her with his eaves. "Do you feel better?" asked Dick, as she at last rejoined him. And after the constraint of so long a silence, his voice sounded foreign to his own ears. She looked at him for an appreciable fraction of a minute ere she answered, and when she did, it was in the monosyllable, "Yes." Dick's solicitude was nipped and frosted. His words died away on his tongue. Even his eyes, despairing of encouragement, ceased to attend on hers. And they went on in silence through Curtain Hamlet, where an old man followed them with his eyes, and perhaps envied them their youth and love, and across the ivy beck where the mill was splashing and grumbling low thunder to itself in the checkered shadow of the dell, and the miller before the door was beating flour from his hands as he whistled a modulation, and up by the high spinney, whence they saw the mountains upon either hand, and down the hill again to the back courts and offices of Nasby House. Esther had kept ahead all the way, and Dick plodded obediently in her wake, but as they neared the stables he pushed on and took the lead. He would have preferred her to await him in the road while he went on and brought the carriage back, but after so many repulses and rebuffs he lacked courage to offer the suggestion. Perhaps, too, he felt it wiser to keep his convoy within sight. So they entered the yard in Indian file, like a tramp and his wife. The groom's eyebrows rose as he received the order for the pony phaeton, and kept rising during all his preparations. Esther stood bolt upright, and looked steadily at some chickens in the corner of the yard. Master Richard himself thought the groom was not in his ordinary, for in truth he carried the handbag like a talisman, and either stood listless, or set off suddenly walking in one direction after another with brisk, decisive footsteps. Moreover, he had apparently neglected to wash his hands, and bore the air of one returning from a prolonged nutting ramble. Upon the groom's countenance there began to grow up an expression as of one about to whistle. And hardly had the carriage turned the corner and rattled into the high road with this inexplicable pair, than the whistle broke forth prolonged, and low and tremulous, and the groom, already so far relieved, vented the rest of his surprise in one simple English word, friendly to the mouth of Jack Tar and the sooty pitman, and hurried to spread the news round the servants' hall of Nasby House. Luncheon would be on the table in little beyond an hour, and the squire, on sitting down, would hardly fail to ask for Master Richard. Hence, as the intelligent reader can foresee, this groom has a part to play in the imbroglio. Meantime, Dick had been thinking deeply and bitterly. It seemed to him as if his love had gone from him, indeed, yet gone but a little way, as if he needed but to find the right touch or intonation, and her heart would recognize him and be melted. Yet he durst not open his mouth, and drove in silence till they had passed the main park gates and turned into the cross-cut lane along the wall. Then it seemed to him as if it must be now or never. "Can't you see you are killing me?" he cried. "Speak to me, look at me, treat me like a human man." She turned slowly and looked him in the face with eyes that seemed kinder. He dropped the reins and caught her hand, and she made no resistance, although her touch was unresponsive. But when, throwing one arm round her waist, he sought to kiss her lips, not like a lover indeed, not because he wanted to do so, but as a desperate man who puts his fortunes to the touch, she drew away from him, with a knot in her forehead, backed and shied about fiercely with her head, and pushed him from her with her hand. Then there was no room left for doubt, and Dick saw, as clear as sunlight, that she had a distaste or nourished a grudge against him. "Then you don't love me," he said, drawing back from her, he also, as though her touch had burnt him. And then, as she made no answer, he repeated with another intonation, imperious and yet still pathetic, "You don't love me, do you? "I don't know," she replied. "Why do you ask me?" "Oh, how should I know? It has all been lies together, lies and lies and lies." He cried her name sharply, like a man who has taken a physical hurt, and that was the last word that either of them spoke until they reached Thymbury Junction. This was a station isolated in the midst of moorlands, yet lying on the great up line to London. The nearest town, Thymbury itself, was 7 miles distant along the branch they call the Vale of Thym Railway. It was now nearly half an hour past noon. The down train had just gone by, and there would be no more traffic at the junction until 3:30, when the local train comes in to meet the up express at 4:15. The stationmaster had already gone off to his garden, which was half a mile away in a hollow of the moor. A porter, who was just leaving, took charge of the phaeton, and promised to return it before night to Naseby High House. Only a deaf, snuffy, and stern old man remained to play propriety for Dick and Esther. Before the phaeton had driven off, the girl had entered the station and seated herself upon a bench. The endless empty moorland stretched before her, entirely unenclosed, and with no boundary but the horizon. 2 lines of rails, a wagon shed, and a few telegraph posts alone diversified the outlook. As for sounds, the silence was unbroken save by the chant of the telegraph wires and the crying of the plovers on the waste. With the approach of midday, the wind had more and more fallen. It was now sweltering hot, and the air trembled in the sunshine. Dick paused for an instant on the threshold of the platform. Then, in 2 steps, he was by her side, and speaking almost with a sob. "Esther," he said, "have pity on me. What have I done? Can you not forgive me? Esther, you loved me once, can you not love me still?" "How can I tell you? How am I to know?" she answered. "You are all a lie to me, all a lie from first to last. You were laughing at my folly, playing with me like a child, at the very time when you declared you loved me." Which was true? Was any of it true? Or was it all a mockery? I am weary trying to find out. And you say I loved you, I loved my father's friend. I never loved, I never heard of you, until that man came home and I began to find myself deceived. Give me back my father, be what you were before. And you may talk of love indeed. Then you cannot forgive me, cannot? He asked. I have nothing to forgive, she answered. You do not understand. Is that your last word, Esther? Said he, very white, and biting his lip to keep it still. Yes, that is my last word, replied she. Then we are here on false pretenses, and we stay here no longer, he said. Had you still loved me, right or wrong, I should have taken you away, because then I could have made you happy. But as it is, I must speak plainly. What you propose is degrading to you, and an insult to me, and a rank unkindness to your father. Your father may be this or that, but you should use him like a fellow creature. What do you mean? She flashed. I'll leave him my house and all my money. It is more than he deserves. God, I wonder you dare speak to me about that man. And besides, it is all he cares for. Let him take it, and let me never hear from him again. I thought you were romantic about fathers, he said. Is that a taunt? She demanded. No, he replied. It is an argument. No one can make you like him, but don't disgrace him in his own eyes. He is old, Esther, old and broken down. Even I am sorry for him, and he has been the loss of all I cared for. Write to your aunt. When I see her answer, you can leave quietly and naturally, and I will take you to your aunt's door. But in the meantime, you must go home. You have no money, and so you are helpless, and must do as I tell you. And believe me, Esther, I do all for your good, and your good only, so God help me. As she had put her hand into her pocket, withdrawn it empty. I counted upon you, she wailed. You counted rightly then, he retorted. I will not, to please you for a moment, make both of us unhappy for our lives, and since I cannot marry you, we have only been too long away, and must go home at once. Dick, she cried suddenly. Perhaps I might, perhaps in time, perhaps. There is no perhaps about the matter, interrupted Dick. I must go and bring the phaeton. And with that he strode from the station, all in a glow of passion and virtue. Esther, whose eyes had come alive and her cheeks flushed during these last words, relapsed in a second into a state of petrifaction. She remained without motion during his absence, and when he returned suffered herself to be put back into the phaeton and driven off on the return journey like an idiot or a tired child. Compared with what she was now, her condition of the morning seemed positively natural. She sat white and cold and silent, and there was no speculation in her eyes. Poor Dick flailed and flailed at the pony, and once tried to whistle, but his courage was going down. Huge clouds of despair gathered together in his soul, and from time to time their darkness was divided by a piercing flash of longing and regret. He had lost his love for good. The pony was tired, and the hills very long and steep, and the air sultrier than ever, for now the breeze began to fail entirely. It seemed as if this miserable drive would never be done, as if poor Dick would never be able to go away and be comfortably wretched by himself, for all his desire was to escape from her presence and the reproach of her averted looks. He had lost his love. He thought he had lost his love for good. They were already not far from the cottage, when his heart again faltered, and he appealed to her once more, speaking low and eagerly in broken phrases. I cannot live without your love, he concluded. I do not understand what you mean, she replied, and I believe with perfect truth. Then, said he, wounded to the quick, your aunt might come and fetch you herself. Of course you can command me as you please, but I think it would be better so. Oh yes, she said wearily, better so. This was the only exchange of words between them till about 4 o'clock. The phaeton, mounting the lane, opened out the cottage between the leafy banks. Thin smoke went straight up from the chimney. The flowers in the garden, the hawthorn in the lane, hung down their heads in the heat. The stillness was broken only by the sound of hoofs, for right before the gate a livery servant rode slowly up and down, leading a saddle horse, and in this last Dick shuddered to identify his father's chestnut. Alas! Poor Richard! What should this portend? The servant, as in duty bound, dismounted and took the phaeton into his keeping. Yet Dick thought he touched his hat to him with something of a grin. Esther, passive as ever, was helped out and crossed the garden with a slow and mechanical gait, and Dick, following close behind her, heard from within the cottage his father's voice upraised in anathema, and the shriller tones of the Admiral responding in the key of war. Chapter 8. Battle Royal. Squire Naseby, on sitting down to lunch, had inquired for Dick, whom he had not seen since the day before at dinner, and the servant answering awkwardly that Master Richard had come back but had gone out again with the pony phaeton, his suspicions became aroused, and he cross-questioned the man until the whole was out. It appeared from this report that Dick had been going about for nearly a month with a girl in the Vale, a Miss Van Tromp, that she lived near Lord Trevanian's upper wood, that recently Miss Van Tromp's papa had returned home from foreign parts after a prolonged absence, that this papa was an old gentleman, very chatty and free with his money in the public house, whereupon Mr. Naseby became encrimsoned, that the papa, furthermore, was said to be an admiral, whereupon Mr. Naseby spat out a whistle brief and fierce as an oath, that Master Dick seemed very friendly with the papa, God help him, said Mr. Naseby. That last night Master Dick had not come in, and today he had driven away in the phaeton with the young lady. Young woman, corrected Mr. Naseby. Yes, sir, said the man, who had been unwilling enough to gossip from the first, and was now cowed by the effect of his communications on the master. Young woman, sir? Had they luggage? Demanded the squire. Yes, sir. Mr. Naseby was silent for a moment, struggling to keep down his emotion, and he mastered it so far as to mount into the sarcastic vein, when he was in the nearest danger of melting into the sorrowful. And was this Van Dunk with them? He asked, dwelling scornfully upon the name. The servant believed not, and being eager to shift the responsibility of speech to other shoulders, suggested that perhaps the master had better inquire further from George the stableman in person. Tell him to saddle the chestnut and come with me. He can take the grey gelding, for we may ride fast. And then you can take away this trash, added Mr. Naseby, pointing to the luncheon, and he arose, lordly in his anger, and marched forth upon the terrace to await his horse. There Dick's old nurse shrunk up to him, for the news went like wildfire over Naseby House, and timidly expressed a hope that there was nothing much amiss with the young master. I'll pull him through, the squire said grimly, as though he meant to pull him through a threshing mill. I'll save him from this gang. God help him with the next. He has a taste for low company, and no natural affections to steady him. His father was no society for him. He must go fuddling with a Dutchman, Nance, and now he's caught. Let us pray he'll take the lesson, he added more gravely. But youth is here to make troubles, and age to pull them out again. Nance whimpered and recalled several episodes of Dick's childhood, which moved Mr. Naseby to blow his nose and shake her hard by the hand, and then the horse arriving opportunely to get himself without delay into the saddle and canter off. He rode straight, hot spur, to Thynbury, where, as was to be expected, he could glean no tidings of the runaways. They had not been seen at the George. They had not been seen at the station. The shadow darkened on Mr. Naseby's face. The junction did not occur to him. His last hope was for Van Tromp's cottage. Thither he bade George guide him, and thither he followed, nursing grief, anxiety, and indignation in his heart. Here it is, sir, said George, stopping. What? On my own land, he cried. How's this? I let this place to somebody M. Werter or Meg Glashan. Miss M. Glashan was the young lady's aunt, sir, I believe, returned George. Aye, dummies, said the squire. I shall whistle for my rent too. Here, take my horse. The Admiral, this hot afternoon, was sitting by the window with a long glass. He already knew the squire by sight, and now, seeing him dismount before the cottage and come striding through the garden, concluded without doubt he was there to ask for Esther's hand. This is why the girl is not yet home, he thought. A very suitable delicacy on young Naseby's part. And he composed himself with some pomp, answered the loud rattle of the riding whip upon the door with a dulcet invitation to enter, and coming forward with a bow and a smile, Mr. Naseby, I believe, said he. The squire came armed for battle, took in his man from top to toe in one rapid and scornful glance, and decided on a course at once. He must let the fellow see that he understood him. You are Mr. Van Tromp, he returned roughly, and without taking any notice of the proffered hand. The same, sir, replied the Admiral. Pray be seated. No, sir, said the squire, point blank, I will not be seated. I am told that you are an admiral, he added. No, sir, I am not an admiral, returned Van Tromp, who now began to grow nettled and obstitter into the spirit of the interview. Then why do you call yourself one, sir? I have to ask your pardon, I do not, says Van Tromp, as grand as the Pope. But nothing was of avail against the squire. You sail under false colours from beginning to end, he said. Your very house was taken under a sham name. It is not my house. I am my daughter's guest, replied the Admiral. If it were my house. Well, said the squire, what then? The Admiral looked at him nobly, but was silent. Look here, said Mr. Naseby, this intimidation is a waste of time. It is thrown away on me, sir. It will not succeed with me. I will not permit you even to gain time by your fencing. Now, sir, I presume you understand what brings me here. I am entirely at a loss to account for your intrusion, bows and waves, Van Tromp. I will try to tell you then. I come here as a father. Down came the riding whip upon the table. I have right and justice upon my side. I understand your calculations, but you calculated without me. I am a man of the world, and I see through you and your maneuvers. I am dealing now with a conspiracy. I stigmatize it as such, and I will expose it and crush it. And now I order you to tell me how far things have gone, and whither you have smuggled my unhappy son. My God, sir, Van Tromp broke out, I have had about enough of this. Your son, God knows where he is for me. To what the devil have I to do with your son? My daughter is out. For the matter of that, I might ask you where she was, and what would you say to that? This is all midsummer madness. Name your business distinctly, and be off. How often am I to tell you? Cried the squire. Where did your daughter take my son today in that cursed pony carriage? In a pony carriage, repeated Van Tromp. Yes, sir, with luggage. Luggage. Van Tromp had turned a little pale. Luggage, I said luggage, shouted Naseby. You may spare me this dissimulation. Where's my son? You are speaking to a father, sir. A father. But, sir, if this be true, out came Van Tromp in a new key. It is I who have an explanation to demand. Precisely. There is the conspiracy, retorted Naseby. Oh, he added, I am a man of the world. I can see through and through you. Van Tromp began to understand. You speak a great deal about being a father, Mr. Naseby, said he. I believe you forget that the appellation is common to both of us. I am at a loss to figure to myself, however dimly, how any man I have not said any gentleman could so brazenly insult another as you have been insulting me since you entered this house. For the first time I appreciate your base insinuations, and I despise them in you. You were? I am told. A manufacturer. I am an artist. I have seen better days. I have moved in societies where you would not be received, and dined where you would be glad to pay £1 to see me dining. The so-called aristocracy of wealth, sir, I despise. I refuse to help you. I refuse to be helped by you. There lies the door. And the Admiral stood forth in a halo. It was then that Dick entered. He had been waiting in the porch for some time back, and Esther had been listlessly standing by his side. He had put out his hand to bar her entrance, and she had submitted without surprise, and though she seemed to listen, she scarcely appeared to comprehend. Dick, on his part, was as white as a sheet. His eyes burned and his lips trembled with anger as he thrust the door suddenly open, introduced Esther with ceremonious gallantry, and stood forward and knocked his hat firmer on his head like a man about to leap. What is all this? He demanded. Is this your father, Mr. Naseby? Inquired the Admiral. It is, said the young man. I make you my compliments, returned Van Tromp. Dick, cried his father, suddenly breaking forth, it is not too late, is it? I have come here in time to save you. Come. Come away with me, come away from this place. And he fawned upon Dick with his hands. Keep your hands off me, cried Dick, not meaning unkindness, but because his nerves were shattered by so many successive miseries. No, no, said the old man. Don't repulse your father, Dick, when he has come here to save you. Don't repulse me, my boy. Perhaps I have not been kind to you, not quite considerate, too harsh, my boy. It was not for want of love. Think of old times. I was kind to you then, was I not? When you were a child, and your mother was with us. Mr. Naseby was interrupted by a sort of sob. Dick stood looking at him in amaze. Come away, pursued the father in a whisper. You need not be afraid of any consequences. I am a man of the world, Dick, and she can have no claim on you, no claim, I tell you, and will be handsome too. Dick will give them a good round figure, father and daughter, and there's an end. He had been trying to get Dick towards the door, but the latter stood off. You had better take care, sir. How you insult that lady, said the son, as black as night. You would not choose between your father and your mistress, said the father. What do you call her, sir? Cried Dick, high and clear. Forbearance and patience were not among Mr. Naseby's qualities. I called her your mistress, he shouted, and I might have called her a. That is an unmanly lie, replied Dick, slowly. Dick! Cried the father, Dick. I do not care, said the son, strengthening himself against his own heart. I have said it, and it is the truth. There was a pause. "Dick," said the old man at last, in a voice that was shaken as by a gale of wind, "I am going. I leave you with your friends, so with your friends. I came to serve you, and now I go away a broken man. For years I have seen this coming, and now it has come. You never loved me. Now you have been the death of me. You may boast of that. Now I leave you. God pardon you." With that he was gone, and the three who remained together heard his horse's hoofs descend the lane. Esther had not made a sign throughout the interview, and still kept silence now that it was over, but the Admiral, who had once or twice moved forward and drawn back again, now advanced for good. "You are a man of spirit, sir," said he to Dick. "But though I am no friend to parental interference, I will say that you were heavy on the governor." Then he added with a chuckle, "You began, Richard, with a silver spoon, and here you are in the water like the rest. Work, work, nothing like work. You have parts, you have manners. Why, with application you may die a millionaire." Dick shook himself. He took Esther by the hand, looking at her mournfully. "And this is farewell," he said. "Yes," she answered. There was no tone in her voice, and she did not return his gaze. "Forever," added Dick. "Forever," she repeated mechanically. "I have had hard measure," he continued. "In time I believe I could have shown you I was worthy, and there was no time long enough to show how much I loved you, but it was not to be. I have lost all." He relinquished her hand, still looking at her, and she turned to leave the room. "Well, what in fortune's name is the meaning of all this?" cried Van Tromp. "Esther, come back." "Let her go," said Dick, and he watched her disappear with strangely mingled feelings, for he had fallen into that stage when men have the vertigo of misfortune, caught the strokes of destiny, and rush towards anything decisive, that it may free them from suspense though at the cost of ruin. It is one of the many minor forms of suicide. "She did not love me," he said, turning to her father. "I feared as much," said he, "when I sounded her. Poor Dick, poor Dick. And yet I believe I am as much cut up as you are. I was born to see others happy." "You forget," returned Dick, with something like a sneer, "that I am now a pauper." Van Tromp snapped his fingers. "Tut," said he. "Esther has plenty for us all." Dick looked at him with some wonder. It had never dawned upon him that this shiftless, thriftless, worthless, sponging parasite was yet, after and in spite of all, not mercenary in the issue of his thoughts, yet so it was. "Now," said Dick, "I must go." "Go?" cried Van Tromp. "Where?" "Not 1 foot, Mr. Richard Naseby. Here you shall stay in the meantime. And do something practical, advertise for a situation as private secretary, and when you have it, go and welcome. But in the meantime, sir, no false pride, we must stay with our friends. We must sponge a while on Papa Van Tromp, who has sponged so often upon us." "By God," cried Dick, "I believe you are the best of the lot." "Dick, my boy," replied the Admiral, winking, "you mark me. I am not the worst." "Then why," began Dick, and then paused. "But Esther," he began again, once more to interrupt himself. "The fact is, Admiral," he came out with it roundly now, "your daughter wished to run away from you today, and I only brought her back with difficulty." "In the pony carriage?" asked the Admiral, with the silliness of extreme surprise. "Yes," Dick answered. "Why, what the devil was she running away from?" Dick found the question unusually hard to answer. "Why," said he, "you're a bit of a rip." "I behaved to that girl, sir, like an archdeacon," replied Van Tromp warmly. "Well, excuse me, but you drink," insisted Dick. "Yeah, I know that I was a sheet in the wind's eye, sir. Once only, since I reached this place," retorted the Admiral. "Even then I was fit for any drawing room. I should like you to tell me, father's lay in mammy's terricles were clerical. Go upstairs every day with a face like a lobster and cod's eyes, and a dull, upon the back of it not even mirth for the money. No, if that's what she runs for, all I say is, let her run. You see, Dick tried it again, she has fancies." "Confound her fancies," cried Van Tromp. "I used her kindly, she had her own way, I was her father. Besides, I had taken quite a liking to the girl, and meant to stay with her for good. But I tell you what it is, Dick. Since she has trifled with you, oh, yes, she did though. And since her old papa's not good enough for her, the devil take her, say I." "You will be kind to her at least," said Dick. "I never was unkind to a living soul," replied the Admiral. "Firm I can be, but not unkind." "Well," said Dick, offering his hand, "God bless you and farewell." The Admiral swore by all his gods he should not go. "Dick," he said, "you are a selfish dog, you forget your old Admiral. You wouldn't leave him alone, would you?" It was useless to remind him that the house was not his to dispose of, that being a class of considerations to which his intelligence was closed, so Dick tore himself off by force, and, shouting a goodbye, made off along the lane to Fineberry. Chapter 9. in which the liberal editor reappears as Deus ex machina. It was perhaps a week later, as old Mr. Naseby sat brooding in his study, that there was shown in upon him, on urgent business, a little hectic gentleman shabbily attired. "I have to ask pardon for this intrusion, Mr. Naseby," he said, "but I come here to perform a duty. My card has been sent in, but perhaps you may not know what it does not tell you, that I am the editor of the Thymbury Star." Mr. Naseby looked up, indignant. "For I cannot fancy," he said, "that we have much in common to discuss. I have only a word to say, one piece of information to communicate. Some months ago you will pardon my referring to it. It is absolutely necessary, but we had an unfortunate difference as to facts." "Have you come to apologize?" asked the squire, sternly. "No, sir, to mention a circumstance. On the morning in question, your son, Mr. Richard Naseby—" "I do not permit his name to be mentioned." "You will, however, permit me," replied the editor. "You are cruel," said the squire. He was right. He was a broken man. So then the editor described Dick's warning visit, and how he had seen in the lad's eye that there was a thrashing in the wind, and had escaped through pity only, so the editor put it through pity only, sir. "And oh, sir," he went on, "if you had seen him speaking up for you, I am sure you would have been proud of your son, for I know I admired the lad myself, and indeed that's what brings me here." "I have misjudged him," said the squire. "Do you know where he is?" "Yes, sir, he lies sick at Thymbury. You can take me to him." "I can. I pray God he may forgive me," said the father. And he and the editor made post-haste for the country town. The next day the report went abroad that Mr. Richard was reconciled to his father, and had been taken home to Naseby House. He was still ailing, it was said, and the squire nursed him like the proverbial woman. Rumour, in this instance, did no more than justice to the truth, and over the sickbed many confidences were exchanged, and clouds that had been growing for years passed away in a few hours, and as fond mankind loves to hope, for ever. So many long talks had been fruitless in external action, though fruitful for the understanding of the pair, but at last, one showery Tuesday, the squire might have been observed upon his way to the cottage in the lane. The old gentleman had arranged his features with a view to self-command, rather than external cheerfulness, and he entered the cottage on his visit of conciliation with the bearing of a clergyman come to announce a death. The Admiral and his daughter were both within, and both looked upon their visitor with more surprise than favour. "Sir," said he to Van Tromp, "I am told I have done you much injustice." There came a little sound in Esther's throat, and she put her hand suddenly to her heart. "You have, sir, and the acknowledgment suffices," replied the Admiral. "I am prepared, sir, to be easy with you, since I hear you have made it up with my friend Dick, but let me remind you that you owe some apologies to this young lady also." "I shall have the temerity to ask for more than her forgiveness," said the squire. "Miss Van Tromp," he continued, "once I was in great distress, and knew nothing of you or your character, but I believe you will pardon a few rough words to an old man who asks forgiveness from his heart. I have heard much of you since then, for you have a fervent advocate in my house. I believe you will understand that I speak of my son. He is, I regret to say, very far from well. He does not pick up as the doctors had expected. He has a great deal upon his mind, and, to tell you the truth, my girl, if you won't help us, I am afraid I shall lose him. Come now, forgive him. I was angry with him once myself, and I found I was in the wrong. This is only a misunderstanding like the other, believe me, and with one kind movement you may give happiness to him, and to me, and to yourself." Esther made a movement towards the door, but long before she reached it she had broken forth sobbing. "It is all right," said the Admiral. "I understand the sex. Let me make you my compliments, Mr. Naseby." The squire was too much relieved to be angry. "My dear," said he to Esther, "you must not agitate yourself." "She had better go up and see him right away," suggested Van Tromp. "So I had not ventured to propose it," replied the squire. "Less convenances, I believe." "J.M. in fish!" cried the Admiral, snapping his fingers. "She shall go and see my friend Dick. Run and get ready." Esther obeyed. "She has not run away again?" inquired Mr. Naseby as soon as she was gone. "No," said Van Tromp, "not again. She is a devilish odd girl, though, mind you that. But I cannot stomach the man with the carbuncles," thought the squire. "And this is why there is a new household and a brand new baby in Naseby Dower House, and why the great Van Tromp lives in pleasant style upon the shores of England, and why 26 individual copies of the Thymbury Star are received daily at the door of Naseby House." The end. This has been an audiobook created by the team at Best Audiobooks for free, published on both YouTube and Rumble. Please subscribe to our channel, as your subscription allows us to bring you more great free content. Please look to our website at www.bestaudiobooksforfree.com for a complete list of our audiobooks.